Welcome, quiet soul. You always hear what others miss. You are the listener history has been waiting for. Are you curious about how Roman emperors maintained their power? Beyond the mighty armies, political schemes, and vast treasuries, there's one very normal but extremely important detail that often gets overlooked: personal appearance. And surprisingly, amidst their legendary military victories, these emperors also struggled with very earthly issues like acne, baldness, and even bathing. So how did Roman emperors handle these problems? Let's dive into some little-known facts about personal grooming in the world of history's most powerful leaders. And before we dive in, I'd love to know, did anything in this story strike a chord with you? Stir your curiosity? Drop a comment below. Who knows, your thought might just become the little treasure the whole community will want to dig up. And hey, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to like, share, or hit subscribe, because sometimes a single click can send 100 amazing stories rippling outward. First, we have to mention Julius Caesar the Emperor, who was as powerful as he was bald. His baldness could probably be called a hair crisis of the Roman era, no exaggeration. Caesar faced a problem that even the empire itself couldn't solve: how to hide his shiny bald head without losing his imperial dignity. And the answer was the laurel wreath. You might think that laurel wreaths were just for major victories, but Caesar turned it into a magical accessory that not only covered his bald spot, but also gave him a power look no one could critique. It's easy to see that the laurel wreath was in fact his helmet as emperor. Who would have thought? And it didn't stop with Caesar. The laurel wreath became a fashionable item for all subsequent Roman emperors. When they wore it, emperors not only hid a few stray hairs, but also became instantly smarter, more majestic, and far more powerful. How amazing is it to hide a flaw and create such a distinctive impression at the same time? But don't think that Roman emperors only cared about their hair. Otho, another emperor from 69 AD, also faced the issue of baldness. However, instead of using a laurel wreath like Caesar, he took a bolder approach, wearing a wig. Yes, Otho was one of the pioneers of the hair enhancement technology of the Roman era. His wig wasn't the cheap kind either. It was incredibly fine craftsmanship, so much so that if you weren't paying attention, you'd never guess that he was borrowing hair to cover up his thinning locks. Truly, not only were Roman emperors top-notch in military strategy, but they were also trailblazers in the beauty industry, turning the wearing of wigs into a strategy that helped them win battles and win the admiration of their subjects. And what about Domitian? He wasn't going to be left behind in the beauty race among Roman emperors. Though known for his strict and unforgiving political style, when it came to his appearance, Domitian was obsessively meticulous. He probably spent hours perfecting his hair, and there were even rumours that he once spent an entire morning admiring himself in the mirror, ensuring not a single strand of hair fell into the danger zone. And it makes sense, because for Domitian, wigs weren't just for hiding. They were a clear declaration of power. He didn't just wear a wig like everyone else. He demanded that it always be perfectly styled, with no strand out of place and no gust of wind allowed to disturb the order of the emperor. Perhaps if one of his hairs had been out of place, the Roman Empire itself would have shaken from the loss of such regal composure. And if you think hair was the only concern for emperors, Caracalla gives you a reason to surrender completely. Not only did he wear wigs, but he also changed his hairstyle depending on the country he visited. That's right, every time he entered a new land, Caracalla would transform entirely. When he arrived in Germany, he decided to try the German hairstyle, a look that only the Germans could see without bursting into laughter. Just imagine you're a German and suddenly see the Roman emperor sporting a hairstyle that looks like it's made for your people. Talk about pleasing the people in a way no one had ever thought of. Perhaps Caracalla thought something like this: as long as my hair looks like theirs, they'll see me as a friend, not an invader. And to his surprise, this hair strategy actually worked, earning him enthusiastic support from the German people. Who would have thought that a hairstyle could spark a diplomatic revolution? German hair, Roman heart, it was like making peace with an internal hairdo. But don't think that hair was the only issue for emperors. Take Hadrian, for example, an emperor famous not only for his gentle demeanour and deep intellect, but also for his beard. Yes, while other emperors fumbled with wigs, Hadrian decided to grow a top-tier beard. Not just any beard, mind you, but one that became a symbol of power. If you thought beards were just for hiding a double chin, Hadrian proved the opposite. A beard was a political tool. Perhaps instead of a laurel wreath or wigs, Hadrian realised that all he needed was the right kind of beard to make an impression and maintain his prestige. People admired him for how he paired his beard with his power. Certainly no one wanted to compete with an emperor sporting such a serious and powerful beard. A beard could make an empire, at least in the eyes of those who admired Hadrian. After exploring the unimaginable hair strategies of the emperors, it's time to turn to another fascinating issue that few people think about when discussing these powerful kings' acne, yes acne, the very thing that even emperors famous for their cruelty and military prowess couldn't avoid. Can you imagine an emperor who had won battles against countless armies, yet still had to stand before a mirror struggling with an annoying pimple on his face? Just one pimple, and it felt like a battle had just taken place. And who was the first emperor to suffer from pimples among the Roman emperors? It was Tiberius, the man who could command the defeat of a mighty army but couldn't conquer a pimple on his face. That's right. While other emperors were implementing policies, Tiberius was fighting a daily war on acne. And it wasn't just a tiny pimple, but stubborn pimples that clung to him relentlessly. Imagine Tiberius sitting on his throne with acne on his cheek. It sounds like a battle just occurred, but no, it was an internal war against acne. Perhaps we all picture Roman emperors as grand and dignified given that they ruled over vast empires, and yet there were times when they weren't so grand, at least not when faced with pimples growing on their cheeks and foreheads. Turns out emperors were just as human as the rest of us. And why wouldn't they be? After all, an emperor is still a person. That's right, acne became one of Tiberius's invincible enemies. It's a rather laughable situation when you think about how the Roman Empire could be conquered, but a single pimple had the emperor defeated. But Tiberius wasn't the only one battling this mortal enemy. Acne doesn't discriminate between emperors and commoners. They too had to face the pimples on their faces like everyone else. And while modern-day doctors can pamper you with miraculous skincare treatments, Roman doctors only had a collection of bizarre ancient formulas to deal with the problem. For instance, Celsus, the famous Roman doctor, invented a pimple treatment formula that sounds so unique it's almost comical. Tree sap, alum, honey and vinegar. Just hearing this, you might think you're preparing an ancient dish rather than a beauty remedy. Pimples and vinegar, pimples and alum. It's a cleaning formula straight from the time of our great-grandparents. Surely no one would dare try this right after lunch, right? And no matter how creative Celsus was, he had to admit, treating acne really isn't worth the effort. So if you happen to have pimples, at least you can breathe a sigh of relief knowing you don't have to deal with tree sap and vinegar like the Roman emperors did. You might think that as an emperor you'd have a collection of organic effective herbs harvested by the best doctors in the land, applying them to your face to achieve skin smoother than a model's, but no. To maintain their soft, smooth skin, Roman emperors used a special remedy, volcanic stones. And no, this wasn't a feng shui stone or some fancy decoration. It was pumice stone, born from molten lava used to exfoliate in a way that could not be mistaken. Instead of using moisturizers, Roman emperors would simply use a rough stone, rubbing it on their faces as if preparing for an all-day battle. That was the royal exfoliation strategy. If there had been a beauty contest in ancient Rome, pumice stone would have won the grand prize without breaking a sweat. So what's the purpose of this stone? Well, it's nothing complicated, just a simple way to clean the body by removing dead skin, much like modern exfoliating creams, but without the lavender or fragrant soap bubbles. Pumice stone has one job to clean, nothing more. While it may sound rough and uncomfortable, emperors like Augustus and Tiberius were willing to endure a little discomfort on their skin to maintain their imperial appearance, because without those pumice stones they probably wouldn't have kept the title of handsomest emperor of Rome. But don't think that's all. When it comes to personal grooming, Roman emperors had other exclusive methods to protect their beauty. After being pampered with pumice stones, Roman emperors continued their battle with a problem just as challenging: body odour. And perhaps you didn't know this, but there's even the truth that an emperor fresh from battle and conquering lands was still worried. Do I smell too bad, sweats pouring out like a waterfall? Do you think these powerful emperors victorious across the battlefields ever had to think about spraying perfume for themselves? The answer is absolutely. In fact, body odour was a real challenge for the Roman emperors. But instead of sitting around wondering how to mask their body odour in an era with no soap or perfume like today, they creatively invented unique and wonderfully fragrant natural perfumes. While today we have bottles of perfume from France with all kinds of luxurious scents, Roman emperors used substances much more in tune with nature. That's right, they didn't need expensive perfumes. Instead, they used fragrances from laurel, lavender, and other herbs to create a mild and pleasant scent. If you're imagining a royal fragrance wafting from lavish parties, you're mistaken. It was actually the perfect blend of natural herbs that gave them a powerful yet subtle presence. You might think only powerful emperors could afford the time to study these herbs. But actually it wasn't just the emperors who used these fragrances. Essential oils from laurel and lavender didn't just create a scent, they played an important role in preserving health. Using natural herbs wasn't just a personal hygiene strategy, it was also a way for emperors to affirm their sophistication and commitment to a healthy lifestyle. They weren't only concerned with appearances, but knew how to blend beauty with health, exuding strength while remaining elegant and refined. A combination that surely not everyone could achieve. And how would you feel if one day you could smell the fragrance of Julius Caesar, or Hadrian? A hint of laurel, a touch of lavender, all blending together to create a signature scent so powerful and noble that you could immediately recognize who's in charge. These powerful emperors didn't just conquer the battlefield, they also triumphed in the battle of scents, maintaining a perfect image in the eyes of their subjects and courtiers. After going through the amazing beauty strategies of Roman emperors, let's now look at an essential part of their royal life bathing. Forget about fragrant soaps and lavender-scented shower gels, because those didn't exist. Back then, Roman emperors had only olive oil and a scraping tool, the strigil. Oh yes, that was the high-end beauty technology of ancient times. The strigil, the oddly shaped curved scraping tool, was the bath tool of Roman emperors. Did you imagine they bathed with warm water and milk like in fairy tale movies? Think again. After rubbing olive oil on their bodies to soften the skin, the emperors would take the strigil and scrape away the sweat and oil. Honestly, this wasn't just a bath, it was cosmetic treatment on an unbelievable level. Scraping off sweat instead of soaking in bubbly soapy water is an experience that's hard to imagine today. And don't think that only commoners had to endure this process. Even powerful emperors couldn't escape it. Augustus, the great emperor, although famous for his military victories, had to face a problem just as serious itchy skin from using the strigil too much. Imagine the mighty emperor battling calluses while everyone else thought he was sitting on his throne without a care in the world. Hadrian, the emperor of the Severan dynasty, was quite different. He had a rather unique bathing style, and was perhaps the first to turn public baths into a social gathering spot. That's right, instead of sitting on his throne in a luxurious robe looking down at the world with a regal gaze, Hadrian chose to blend in with the people through communal bathing sessions. And when I say communal bathing, it wasn't just about soaking in warm water, it was also a perfect opportunity to chat, scrape off oil, and share a little sweat with the crowd. Perhaps Hadrian thought, if you're an emperor, why not work and chat with regular folks at the same time? So would you like to try Hadrian's bathing technology? Scraping off oil instead of using soap may sound strange, but if you lived in Rome back then, you might have to admit, it's certainly not comfortable, but at least it works. Don't worry, we can imagine communal bathing with the emperor as a great way to connect with the community, but be sure not to sit next to him while he's scraping off oil. If you tried this today, you'd probably give up as soon as you saw there was no soap suds. Anyway, while we enjoy relaxing baths and fragrant moisturizing soaps today, Roman emperors had their own hygiene strategy. They didn't just focus on beauty, they had to invest in cleaning rituals to maintain their powerful image. And if you lived in that time, you'd probably have learned to love olive oil and the strigil, instead of the luxurious bathtubs we have now. So have you ever thought about the fact that Roman emperors had to deal with a very everyday problem like doing laundry? It may not seem to fit with their legendary victories and military strategies, but listen to this: urine was the luxury cleaner that both emperors and commoners in Rome used for washing clothes. Yes, you heard that right, urine. The very thing we often avoid was the official laundry detergent of the Roman Empire. You might be thinking, washing clothes with urine, I wouldn't even want to wash my clothes with dish soap. But actually, urine contains ammonia, a powerful cleaning agent that the Romans discovered long before soap and detergent were invented. Lavender-scented soap is a modern choice, but in the ancient world, if you were Roman, a little urine was more than enough. Whenever they had a stubborn stain, they would simply dip the clothes into urine. It's safe to say this was the fastest and most effective way to wash clothes in the ancient world, not at all inferior to modern commercial soaps. So if you lived in the Roman Empire, would you be willing to try this new laundry technology? It may sound strange, but if needed, you wouldn't have to worry about dirty clothes because there was a very special cleaning hack ready to serve you just a little urine, and your clothes would be as clean as new. What could be better? But don't think that urine was simply a cleaning agent. Emperor Vespasian made a truly wise decision. He decided to tax urine. You're wondering how that works. Let me explain the urine tax officially became part of the Roman Empire's tax system. And don't just think it was some clever wordplay. Vespasian really imposed a tax on people for using urine to wash clothes. Imagine strolling through the streets of Rome and suddenly being asked to pay a urine tax. You'd definitely stop and reconsider the emperor's unique way of raising funds. The story gets even more interesting when Titus Vespasian's son complained about the unpleasant smell of urine. In a humorous moment of imperial wit, Vespasian held up the first coin collected from the urine tax to Titus's nose and asked, "Do you find the smell unpleasant?" When Titus replied that he didn't, Vespasian chuckled and said, "Then this coin doesn't smell either." It turns out that from urine to money, everything could be perfectly combined in the Roman Empire, and Vespasian left us all in awe with his cleverness. Although urine may not be the ideal way to wash clothes today, at least Vespasian proved that any resource, even something most people wouldn't want to mention, could be turned into gold. And with his humour, which was almost unbelievable, he made the world reconsider the way resources are utilised. Who would have thought that urine could become such a brilliant wealth-building strategy? After experimenting with laundry using urine, let's move on to an even more fascinating topic in Roman royal life: public restrooms. And I guarantee you'll never think of them the same way again. Forget the image of luxurious private toilets with closed doors that you might imagine. Roman public restrooms were a whole different story. Imagine this: no partitions, no closed doors, and everyone from commoners to emperors sitting next to each other on the intimate seating platforms. If you were Roman, taking care of personal business was not a private affair. You could easily sit next to the emperor, chat about politics, the war, or family matters, all while taking care of business together. It truly was an incredibly connected space. Who says networking only happens in conference rooms? And don't think that only commoners had to endure this situation. Roman emperors were no exception. Yes, the most victorious and powerful kings in the Roman Empire, despite sitting on mighty thrones, still had to perform their duties alongside common people. Perhaps for them there was nothing more friendly than sitting together on a restroom bench and discussing the fate of the entire empire. What could be more special than that? However, you can't deny that sitting on the same restroom bench with a Roman emperor was truly an intimate experience that not everyone had the chance to enjoy. Imagine if you were invited to join them there, you might even forget about stressing over politics. Remember Hadrian. This emperor was not only famous for his refinement, but also quite game when it came to personal needs. Seeing that public restrooms didn't meet his elite standards, he decided to build his own private toilet, but don't think it was just a regular bench. Hadrian created a marble seat complete with its own water faucet for cleaning, so he could finish the job and wash up without having to use a cold bucket of water or the old-fashioned tools. Now that's a way to elevate the quality of living right. This was truly the royal hygiene standard, but not every emperor could afford such a fantastic toilet. Emperors like Tiberius couldn't even dream of a private restroom. He still had to sit on the same bench as the commoners in those dismal public restrooms, with no partitions, no privacy whatsoever. Despite holding supreme power, Tiberius couldn't avoid these chatty meetings, where politics were discussed while taking care of business. Imagine discussing important empire strategies while sitting next to someone and facing an awkward situation. Surely this wasn't the kind of meeting anyone would dream of attending. After dealing with public restrooms and sitting next to commoners in the most indiscreet situations, Roman emperors didn't just maintain their power through decisions about war, they also paid attention to their nails. Whether sitting on the throne or commanding armies, a Roman emperor couldn't afford to have hands that looked like a rookie's. Why? Simply because nails were the first thing nobles and subjects would notice when they bowed to pay their respects. You could win the greatest battle, but if your nails were rough and unkempt, that empire was sure to have problems. Hadrian wasn't just famous for his intellect, he was also known for his royal nails. No one would think that an emperor could spend an entire morning in front of a mirror just to trim his nails to perfection. But Hadrian was different. He didn't just protect the empire with military tactics. He did so with each of his fingers, setting an example for all emperors who came after him. It was said that he could lead an army into battle without any soldiers, simply by waving his hand and making the enemy surrender because they were too mesmerized by the sharpness of his nails. Tiberius wasn't about to be outdone, though. Although he had to sit on the same bench as the commoners in the public restroom, don't think for a second that he didn't have his own personal care strategy. Along with treating his acne, Tiberius meticulously invested in his nails. Surely when discussing national strategy, no noble would dare overlook his seriousness, because with just a wave of his hand, Tiberius proved his power. These hands didn't just scare people, they made them silently admire him. So if you think caring for an emperor's nails is a trivial matter, you're mistaken. Imagine who would respect an emperor with hands that looked like they worked in digging. Roman emperors' nails weren't just for decoration. They were meant to create an impression their hands were the soft weapons used to maintain their dignity. Remember, between war and politics, if you didn't take care of your nails, you could lose power over the smallest details that were overlooked. Alright, after exploring the beauty strategies with nails and personal care that never stopped shining, let's move on to a very important part of maintaining power: diet and hygiene. No Roman emperors weren't just brilliant warriors, they were also masters in crafting an image of power through food. Of course, they didn't eat fried rice or pasta like we do. Their so-called royal menu was an art form, from choosing the right foods to how they ate, making sure no sign of weakness or discomfort could be seen at the table. You might imagine that the emperors would feast on luxurious dishes like lobster foie gras or roasted lamb legs with fine wine. But no, to maintain the perfect figure and an absolutely powerful demeanour, they weren't afraid to toss aside humble dishes, and instead focused on foods that could be called one of a kind. Look at Augustus. He was famous not only for his military prowess, but also for his very particular diet. It wasn't about fatty or sweet foods, but a diet that prioritised vegetables and herbs. But don't rush to think he ate like a vegetarian, because somewhere on the menu there would still be meat, but only noble meat, perfectly portioned, never excessive. After enjoying the light, healthy vegetables and delicate herbs, you might imagine that Roman emperors would continue with a meal that was light and refreshing, right? But don't be so quick to assume. To maintain power, not just with light foods, they knew that diet was a crucial strategy, much like a battle where you can't afford to be without weapons. So what did they do? Wine. But not the sweet dessert wine you're thinking of. Roman emperors drank wine like warriors wielding weapons. They didn't drink just to celebrate victories, but to enhance their strength. And don't think wine was just wine. Emperors were very creative, mixing wine with herbs, spices, and even tonic potions you'd have a hard time finding in modern liquor stores. A royal banquet could not be complete without wine, but this wasn't just any wine. It was the kind that made emperors feel like invincible warriors, ready to face any enemy without worrying about pimples or crooked beards. Did the emperors drink wine just for fun? Not at all. They drank wine for power and a little make-up for the soul. After a meal of vegetables, noble meats, and herbal wine, they would stand up, pat their bellies, and think to themselves, "It's not just eating, I've just digested an entire national strategy." Who would have thought that a meal could turn an emperor into a superhero? And as if that wasn't enough, these emperors also paid close attention to physical training. They didn't just sit on their thrones making decisions, they also worked out. Picture a Roman emperor in his cloak exercising while still giving orders for war. That's right, while we might think they only focused on politics and sat in golden palaces. In reality, Roman emperors had a strict fitness regime, not because they were worried about getting fat, but because if they didn't stay in shape, how could they possibly fight the enemies within their empire? Still, they had to keep up their appearance for the evening banquet. Only a belly full of vegetables and herbal wine could prepare them to conquer any meeting. So after a masterful journey through the hygiene strategies and grooming practices of Roman emperors, we've learned one important thing. Power didn't just come from victories on the battlefield, but also from glowing skin, finely crafted wigs, and powerful beards. These Roman emperors may have had mighty empires, but they also had to sacrifice quite a bit of sweat, urine, and body odour to maintain an impeccable appearance. But who could have known that behind those elaborate wigs and light meals lay a secret to power, maintaining an undefeated demeanour whether on the battlefield or in public restrooms? These emperors understood that sitting on the throne required more than just a military strategy. It also demanded an unmatched beauty strategy, from bizarre diets to volcanic stone skincare treatments. And if you feel like today's not powerful enough, not royal enough, like the Roman emperors, just remember, everything starts with a meal of vegetables and a perfectly groomed beard. So whether you're sitting in the office or at home, make sure you're fully armed, at least with a majestic beard and a glass of herbal wine. And if someone asks you about the beauty secrets of Roman emperors, don't hesitate to reply, it's all art. The art from pumice stones to washing clothes with urine. Thank you for following along, and I hope the Roman emperors have inspired you. And don't forget, no matter who you are, power doesn't just come from victories, but also from confidence, beauty, and a little fragrance from laurel. I wish you always stay fresh, Always shine bright and be ready to face every challenge, whether it's politics or body odour. See you next time in more interesting stories, and don't worry, our next one will have a bit less odour.